Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. Today's episode, we have Dori Floyd, who is a holistic fertility coach, and she does a whole bunch of other things. She's a personal trainer, and we dive deep into everything related to fertility, getting pregnant. We talk about hormones and birth control. We talk about cervical mucus and so much more. So we appreciate you guys listening. Talk to you soon. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Here for the Health of It podcast. I'm Dr. Randy, here with Dr. Tom. As always, thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting our show. We see that you guys comment on our stuff, and you share it, and you are giving us reviews. So we appreciate that, and we see that. So we have a special guest today, a multiple-level entrepreneur. You're standing on business, as I found out is a new phrase by 21-year-olds. We have a new producer that just taught me standing on business.
I don't know what that means.
It means so I didn't either. It means that you're serious about your work.
Okay. Yes, that would be true.
Yeah, and my outfit is standing on business.
Okay.
She said.
The
just
outfit?
sounded like a compliment. I don't
like
yeah.
what she was
well,
wearing.
No, she was talking about me, but you're also
I got
your
it.
outfit's
Okay,
also
I'm still not tracking that
standing on
well,
business.
but I believe you.
Yeah.
Takes a while for it
Okay.
to land.
All right, so tell everybody about yourself.
Okay, so I do many things. I wear lots of hats. My sort of big girl job is I work in the hospital. I've probably talked to a couple of you about this before in the past, but I'm a board certified neurophysiologist. So I work with neurosurgeons exclusively in the OR, and we monitor for nerve root and spinal cord integrity. So I'm in the OR with the patients, with the surgeons, doctors, everything from in the room to out of the room. So that's kind of like my number one thing. That's kind of more of my like sciencey nerdy background.
Yeah, you look like a nerd.
I look like a nerd.
That's what I was gonna say. Surgeons are super dorky,
Lord.
right?
I'm kidding.
No, I'm not.
You don't fit the mold as a nerd.
No, well, I'm just saying I have like a sciencey brain. Like I love anatomy and physiology. I studied exercise and sports science in undergrad with more of a focus on community health and wellness. So that was originally what I wanted to do when I graduated from college. But this kind of led me, being in the wellness field, you don't make a lot of money. Just like truthfully, I wanted to work in corporate wellness, and there just wasn't a whole lot of opportunity there. So I decided to start working in neurophysiology. The opportunity came up, and I ran with it. So I've really enjoyed it. I like what I do. I don't know if I'll be in the field forever, especially becoming a mom eventually, hopefully. That job in and itself is just not super supportive of like a regular schedule.
Right.
So it may not be something that I do for the rest of my life. Hopefully part-time so I can at least keep my skills up and that sort of thing. But branching off from that, I decided that I wanted to be a little bit more involved in health and wellness and certainly more involved in women's health. So in addition to working as a neurophysiologist full-time, I am also a personal trainer and nutrition coach at Results Fitness in Columbia. And I've also just recently started my own business called Heart of Health. I have just recently gotten my integrative health practitioner certification, and I am working towards the end of my practicum for my fertility education coaching certification as well.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Wow.
so lots of hats, doing lots of things, really wanting to learn more and more as I go here. So always trying to learn more about women's health and wellness, really just want to be the most well-rounded women's health coach I can possibly be.
Great.
That's good.
So you love education. You love learning.
Maybe a little bit too much. I've also dabbled with going back to school, like for real.
No way.
Yeah.
More?
So yeah. I don't want to go too much into that because I don't want to give away my future endeavors too much.
Okay.
But yeah. So I've also dabbled with like legitimately going back to school and like starting over from scratch.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So what are you most passionate about? Would you say like what thing is it? Fertility? Is that the?
So that's what I've been focusing on for the past probably year and a half now, probably closer to 2 years since I actually started diving like headfirst into fertility awareness-based methods and learning more about why they're beneficial for women. But yeah, I would probably say that fertility awareness is probably my focus right now. But I'm also interested in learning more about how to train women better through all parts of their reproductive continuum.
Gotcha.
So there are other certifications and stuff that I can get to help me bring that knowledge forward more. So yes, I would say that I love education, and that part of it is just learning as much as I possibly can. So I love coaching women, like in general. It's super empowering to watch a woman, lift as heavy as she can and that sort of thing. Super, hyper focused on nutrition and her lifestyle habits and that sort of thing. I think that's where like the true magic happens. And then that also filters back into to the fertility stuff as well.
Right.
Just having a well-rounded foundational habit, and lifestyle habits is super important for both of those things. So I would say that the fertility awareness has been more of a hyper focus for me, just because I'm trying to learn as much as possible in that realm as well. But just the whole entire theme of women's health and wellness is my pinpoint.
Yeah, nice.
Yep.
So I have a question. This is kind of going way back to the dorky thing. But
you being a dork?
I was thinking about
you both have red hair. So
are you truly are like? Do people call you a ginger?
No. I was
Okay.
never. I never quite had like red enough
Like
hair for that.
strawberry blonde.
Strawberry blonde,
Okay.
I got
But
constantly.
that's still like in the redhead
I think
ginger.
it's in the category. Yeah.
You're still there.
Yeah, I would count myself there.
Okay.
So here was what I was thinking this morning while I was working out, or no, I was doing something, and I thought, when you see a guy who's really into Star Trek,
Okay. We're going way back into the
read
nerdy
every
stuff
novel,
here.
knows everything.
Okay.
You kind of know a lot about him. And then there's Star Wars would be the next level,
Right.
And then probably Marvel is
Okay.
like the third level.
We're
There'd
bridging
be
that
3
gap
different
into,
levels.
Right, into the 21st century of
Yep.
yeah, really. Okay.
But then I was trying to, and probably like Dungeons and Dragons maybe is in there. Like there's
sprinkle
kind
that.
of like
Little-
some fantasy kind of
just
stuff in there
just
too.
like the sci-fi
Okay.
look. And then I was thinking, for women, what would it be for women? And I think it would probably be Twilight
Oh,
is
Lord.
in the Star
Like
Trek
vampire.
He
spectrum.
went that direction.
Yeah,
didn't
the
he?
vampire. And then I was thinking Harry Potter's probably like the female Star Wars equivalent.
I don't
That's not
know.
bad. Yeah.
I don't
I mean,
know.
Harry
Well,
Potter.
what kind of fantasy books are you reading these days?
Yeah,
I don't
let's dive
read
into
fantasy
that.
books.
What-
See, smart.
Just health and wellness books, pretty much. I see. I'm like that too.
See, I'm that level of nerdy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not like
yeah,
the
it's sort of a
science
different
fiction,
level.
nonfiction
Yes.
type of stuff, but
Yeah.
or
Okay.
fiction.
Yeah.
I'm just working out my hypothesis. None of it
Just
none
taking
of it has
notes.
been worked out yet.
Doing research. So tell it, what is fertility awareness based methods?
I
What is-
love this question. So
Yeah, I have
because
I
I'm
have no
standing
clue.
here or sitting here talking to 2 men, this conversation is going to look a little bit different. But that's cool because I want everybody to understand what it is, why it's important, that sort of thing. And it's not that it's like important necessarily. It's just that it's a good knowledge to know, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so fertility awareness based methods is a big umbrella term to describe natural family planning methods. So you've heard of things like the calendar method,
Yes.
the rhythm method, the 2-day method, stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons why fertility awareness based methods have such a bad reputation sometimes, is because there are methods underneath that umbrella that have high failure rates in terms of like pregnancy and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So that's what we talk about specifically when we talk about fertility awareness based methods and educating women that it's not these sort of one-faced, put it in a box type of method, that there are a variety of methods out there that we can use to prevent pregnancy, to also achieve pregnancy, because that's also part of natural family planning as well. And then for just charting for overall health. And
Yes.
there's so much out there. I would even put natural cycles as well underneath that realm, underneath that umbrella as well. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Well,
but
yeah, so that's what my wife uses, is Natural
Okay.
Cycles app. And
Right.
just does the temperature stuff, and it seems to be pretty spot on. It gives like the calendars and the whole nine.
Sure, it is to a degree. We generally like to look at a little bit more in terms of biomarkers throughout the month to like really open and close the fertile window.
Yeah.
So that's when, this is the funny part. I've like been replaying this in my head over and over again of how this conversation is going to go with the 2 of you. But that's when we start talking about cervical mucus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm into that.
He's
Well,
I'm
really
into that.
No,
he's really into cervical mucus.
Does the pull-out method count as one of them?
The pull-out method, I would probably yes, because there is a perfect withdrawal method.
Is there?
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
Is there a technical
There
name
is.
for the pull-out method?
The
Is it?
perfect withdrawal.
It's called perfect
Yes,
withdrawal.
yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
and
we
it
should
start-
has
We
You're
need
a
a
doctor.
t-shirt.
You're a doctor. You need to start using it.
Yeah.
and let me put it this way, there are rules for each of these methods, whether they have a high efficacy rate or not. And that's where the education comes into play with it, is that you just have to know what your risk is going into it. So if you're not planning on using like a hormonal contraceptive or an IUD or another form of, like a like a
Condom.
tubal, even like more like sterilization types of procedures, like, getting your tubes tied
Right.
and that sort of thing, then it's just the education piece behind it that I always try to drive home to people is like, what are we using? What's the efficacy rate? What are you willing to do? What are your intentions? So there's like a huge intention scale as well about like, how, risky are we willing to be within this cycle of preventing pregnancy? So there's a lot of stuff that we look at there.
I've never heard of someone getting pregnant using the perfect withdrawal.
You've
method.
never heard of someone getting pregnant from
Almost all my circle doesn't do birth control. Doesn't do any of that.
Right. No, I knew this about the two of you,
Yes.
is that there's probably not a whole lot of hormonal birth control usage.
Yeah, well, definitely not.
No.
I've always
love this
believed.
conversation.
I've always believed because I remember sitting in. I was just talking with my friends about it, where in school they taught us that sperm can live inside of a woman for 3 to 5 days.
That is correct.
So I always assume mine lives 7 to 9 days minimum.
You had
So
super sperm?
Yeah, so I felt like it was risk.
Okay.
Like even following those cycles was riskier for me.
So there is some truth to that. I mean,
I had
that's
a
why
feeling you'd back me up.
that's
on that
why
one.
that's why we look at opening and closing the fertile window for a woman and pinpointing more of when ovulation is
Yes.
because we want to take into consideration that sperm might be able to live a little bit longer. Yeah. The maximum amount of days that I think that they've been able to like scientifically prove is about 5 days.
The maximum?
Yes.
Not Randy's.
I've been banking on 9 days for the last.
No, but
14
well,
years.
here's this because I've read a little bit about this. I dabble.
Okay.
And by that I mean Instagram,
You read the
maybe.
cover of a book one time.
Love that.
So I'm an expert.
Right.
But the X chromosome sperm,
yes, which is the female,
is slower and stays in there longer. That's not true.
No.
The males are.
They have debunked this. So there's actually a, I don't know that what you would call it, a not like a
Cohort.
myth or like it's like a myth busting type of thing here. Like there's a concept, that's the word I was trying to find. There's a concept that depending on when you have intercourse within your fertile window, that you could have a male or a female baby based on how fast your sperm swim. So they've debunked that. So male sperm do not swim faster than female sperm.
See, I thought for sure.
Well, in fact, what we see, like, and this is just kind of to give you like the little like nerdiness about and like scientific breakdown of like cervical mucus. Love this. So you're getting his back to cervical mucus. Don't
no
y'all
We're gonna
love
say
this?
that as many times as we can.
Because that is the environment in which sperm survive. So that is what we look at. So the type of fertile cervical mucus that we have when we want peak fertility and intercourse to happen, that is the type of cervical mucus that filters out the sperm. So it's actually going and picking the ones that
to let it up.
So, to find its way through the cervix.
It's like checking IDs at the door.
Perfect. I love that. I'm going to start using that. I'm definitely going to start using that with my fertility awareness clients.
You're 21.
They're going to start checking IDs at the door for the sperm up your cervix. I love that. But yeah, so that's what we look at, and it's not like whether they're faster or slower, but that was the whole concept of it. Is they were saying that if you had take your fertile window, you open it up, close it with cervical mucus. So we look at certain biomarkers to determine what type of fertile quality it is.
Gotcha.
So they'll say, well, okay, well, at the beginning of your fertile window, if you have intercourse, you're more likely to have this baby versus a male or a female. So that's the concept behind it. But it's a complete myth.
Yeah.
They debunked that like years ago, but people are still use this and think that it's a thing. But like, let them, like, you know what I mean? As long as you're having, fun in your fertile window. I'm like, what am I allowed to say on this podcast? Then as long as you know what's going on, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're just trying to make a baby here.
See, I wrote down a ton of ones, and I'll come back to this.
Okay.
But I think that's what led to people saying that if the woman's on top, that you're more likely to have a boy.
That is also not true. And like the putting your legs up to make sure that all of the
that it stays in there.
Yeah, it all stays in there.
Just gravity.
There's all of these myths have been totally busted over the past, however many decades.
But see, here's what I'd argue with science.
Okay.
I think belief about it trumps what science will even show. Like
always.
Right? So if you believe this is where I was kind of going, is I think men have come up with some like just funny, weird stuff to be their wife to be like, hey, if you want to get pregnant, we got to do the flying squirrel.
Sure. I mean,
because it's
run with it how you want to.
And then as long as they convince themselves like this is on top or this position.
Guys, because remember when Mountain Dew used to be a big thing?
Yeah.
It used to be like if you drink a certain amount of Mountain Dew, you're supposed to have low. And I always thought,
is that like the caffeine content in it or something?
No, it was just
like yellow.
It didn't work.
Maybe the chemicals.
It didn't work with anything else. I don't think it ever worked. But I think it was just guys making up ways to drink more Mountain Dew, saying, I need to drink more of this. And that's like our fertility.
Yeah, that's what we know. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had a lot.
That's so interesting.
Well, that just kind of ruined a lot of my questions. Though I feel like I had a lot of like. See, so for Randy, he has 2 girls, right?
Okay.
Couldn't produce a boy. And so that's why I was like, here's what they say. The deeper you go, the more likely you produce a boy.
I also think that's 1,000% a myth. See, this is exactly what I was expecting. Is these conversations surrounding this? I'm telling you. This is like what I have been going over in my head. I was like, this is where this is going to go. 110%.
And where does I know the audience wants to know all these things that they're trying.
For sure. And like, you can have fun with it and like talk about this stuff. And that's what kind of makes some of this like, relieves like the really serious tension of it too at the same time. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot out there. And I really do try to like, maybe I need to like go over all of this on my Instagram and like talk about, a lot of myths surrounding fertility awareness-based methods, which sometimes I do talk about that type of stuff. And then talk about a lot of these other really, weird common misconceptions surrounding conception and how we do that and that sort of thing. So
there's an evolutionary biology book that's called Why Beautiful People Have More Daughters. Have you heard that?
No.
Yeah.
Is he making this up?
No, I swear.
Can we fact check
that's a book.
I don't believe this.
Yeah, because it gets fired around. All my friends who also have daughters, we just text that book title out
We're
to
gonna
people all the
fact
time.
check this.
See this, and then there's just a lot of theories. Like I think Randy's estrogen's so high that most of his sperm is slow. They camp out. It's just the X's. He can't get those Y's up there. They're just
bless.
Today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Columbia Family Chiropractic, with 3 easy-to-get-to locations, one in Forest Acres, which is by Trader Joe's, one in O'Neill Court by the DMV, and one in the Northeast by Sand Hills. You'll be sure to have somewhere near you. They offer a ton of services from corrective care, on-site digital x-rays, spinal decompression for bulging or herniated discs, dry needling for injuries, pediatric care, and a Class 4 laser. They accept all your major insurances. And if you mention this ad, you'll get a discount on your first appointment. Check out their website at cfc4health.com or Google Columbia Family Chiropractic. That's cfc4health.com.
That's okay.
All right, so let's hit cervical.
Women are awesome too.
Yeah, I think they're great. But I don't know that do you think testosterone has anything to do with whether it's a boy or a girl?
No.
So a guy with super high T or low T,
I love how serious.
nothing.
No, in fact, I'd be
Yeah.
really concerned about low testosterone if you're trying to conceive. So
At all.
that's
or
more
at
of
all.
like
no, just period
Right,
low
right,
yes,
testosterone.
period.
Right.
But yes, from a fertility standpoint, yes.
So
Also, women have testosterone too.
Yeah, but it's real low compared to guys usually.
Pretty low compared to
Yeah.
guys. Yeah.
now, so cervical mucus health. I want to get into
Yes.
that. And so what I think it is probably like almost like your gut health kind of thing, where
Yes and no.
is
Yeah.
it like a
and
flora that you need to like have probiotics and different things
Sure.
for that, or
so cervical mucus is made up a lot of water. So there's a lot of water in cervical mucus. So one of the first things that we do when we're trying to increase cervical mucus is to drink more water, stay hydrated, eat healthy fats. So I always recommend, the salmon, the avocados, the flax seeds, the chia seeds, all the fats that are high in omega-3s. That also, helps with inflammation and all that kind of stuff. So the health of the cervical mucus in itself can come from eating well, but there's also hormonal imbalances that also can cause low cervical mucus as well. So if you have like a low estrogen, then that can also cause us to have low cervical mucus as well. So that's one of the things that we look at as a sign of fertility is how much cervical mucus we're producing around the ovulatory window. So if we don't see a lot of it, then we can maybe make an assumption that we're not ovulating or that we have a hormonal imbalance.
gotcha.
So I remember a Catholic family. When I was in Winnipeg, I took care of a whole bunch of Catholic families so they were all no birth control,
Right.
no condoms,
Mhm.
no, what's it called? Proper, what was it? What's the pull-up method? Withdrawal.
Perfect withdrawal.
Perfect withdrawal.
Perfect withdrawal.
No perfect withdrawal allowed.
Okay.
But they said that they would take the mucus between their
Mhm.
fingers and open it up
And try to stretch it
And the further it
to
stretched,
see. Yes.
the more mucusy.
Yes, that is
It was.
highly fertile cervical mucus.
So that's a real thing.
That's a
These
real
other
thing.
things aren't real.
What's the furthest that you've ever seen?
I mean, as long as you can get it to stretch, but that's not always like a
What?
marker of
So it could stretch like
sure. But
whatever
we're
this
looking,
is.
okay, so think of what an egg white looks like. Not like the egg whites that are in the carton that have been pasteurized, but like what a legitimate egg white looks like that's separated from the yolk.
I have chickens, so,
So-
I know all about this.
Yeah.
So we categorize, and not every method does, but we kind of say when we're looking at cervical mucus in general, we want it to look like egg white quality. So it's clear, it's lubricative, it's slippery. It can also be very wet as well.
Hmm.
So those are the things that we coach as biomarkers and observations throughout the day that we want to look at to make the assumptions of how well our cervical mucus is looking in our fertile window. And so that is a marker of estrogen. So estrogen rises through your fertile window, and that is the sign of ovulatory.
Go time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So how are you testing it? Do you swab? Do you use blood work? Where are you getting the biomarkers from? Urine?
Nope. So before you go to the bathroom, and this is for a female because y'all will have no idea what
Randy's
this means.
because Randy was gonna try this and you didn't say that.
I would love for you to
just-
try
I
that.
have a
to
lot of
clarify.
sperm
You can let me know how
questions
it
too,
goes.
so let's get there.
So the way that we observe, and every woman is different and how they want to do this. But the specific way that I teach how to observe cervical mucus is when we are wiping with toilet paper and go into the bathroom. So when you bear down, it brings forth more cervical mucus. So I'm always coaching women at every point during the day when we know that they're fertile, but their ovulatory window has opened, to just keep looking at their toilet paper and use white toilet paper because that's important.
Right.
They still make like the ones that have like the colors and stuff on it. But wiping with white toilet paper so that we can see shiny, we can see like a more egg white quality on the toilet paper, and we can make that observation.
Interesting.
Yep.
So they don't need like to come to a lab or anything like that. This is a
No.
daily, or not a daily, but during the cycle practice.
Correct.
Cool.
Yep.
So they're wiping after they pee.
Yes. Well, you can wipe before you
like
pee
you
too.
Or just
You
normal.
know, just exactly like you do.
You can also, sometimes I tell women if they don't want to confuse urine with cervical mucus that they can
Right.
also wipe beforehand as well. So it just kind of depends on the woman, you know, how comfortable she is making the observations. And like they learn more as they do this, right? So each cycle, it becomes more familiar for them. And then it's just kind of like second nature.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I can tell when my wife is ovulating just by looking at her.
So that's a real thing.
For sure.
Wow. I love how this other stuff isn't, but
Yeah.
you guys are telling me stretching mucus and just looking at people.
Yeah.
But it's
you
so
gotta
true,
get
though.
educated.
Like,
Tom's so uneducated in this stuff.
I just need to study this more.
But it's really cool. Like there is like a biological reason why men are more attracted to women during their ovulatory
Their
window.
skin is soft. Their lips get red.
For some
their eyes-
reason, we look more appealing during our ovulatory window. Sometimes people have even said that the women smell different. And this is coming from a man. This is not a woman observing these things because she's like hyper focused on her own biomarkers. This is like from men that are saying, I think that I can tell when you're in your ovulatory window.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's totally like an evolutionary biological thing,
It
right?
makes sense.
Yeah. So it totally makes sense. Yeah.
How far up there is the cervix? Like the average? And does that play a factor in pregnancy?
Potentially, yeah. Some people do have a higher cervix than others, but that's like a case by case basis. I don't think women need to be worrying about where their cervix is, and it changes during the month as well. So with ovulation, we see it being softer and opening up more. It's not as hard and firm as it would be in other areas or other phases of our cycle. So there are methods that actually teach cervical position, but it can be difficult to sort of like make that connection. So I don't teach it. Actually, the method that I teach doesn't even go over cervix position because it can just be really confusing. And then you're also sticking your fingers up in there when there's also cervical mucus. And so that can also be confusing as well. And we want to just kind of like, you know, have one or the other.
Well, that's what I was wondering is like, are some of the lubricants or things that people using messing up their cervix and cervical mucus?
Yeah. So there's actually a study that was done about the different types of lube that is used and the benefits versus the, you know, what it would take to get pregnant with these lubricative devices or products that we're using. So they took egg white, like real egg white.
As a lube?
Yes.
Wow.
And pre-seed and a couple others. Pre-seed is like, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It is a lube that is given to people that are trying to conceive that have like low cervical mucus. So what
would be in that? What would
I honestly do not know, and I probably need to do a little bit more research, but I've seen that women that have low cervical mucus will use pre-seed because it mimics cervical mucus. Like it's not going to change the pH in your vagina.
Sure.
So that whole
it sounds like
study.
It sounds like grass.
That's
like,
that's
what pre-seed?
Yeah. Like,
is it
when you're doing your lawn?
I think the pre-seed concept
you ordered
comes
at Home
from.
Depot?
I'm picturing it as being green.
Oh Lord, the package might be. I don't know.
But is it over the counter? Like
yes,
Amazon
you can. I'm pretty sure you can get it like on Amazon.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's supposed to mimic natural cervical mucus, but the study actually found that the egg white, even though that's not recommended because there's like a risk of salmonella, that the actual raw egg white was the most effective in terms of couples trying to conceive that were using lube.
Wow.
Yes, and then pre-seed was second.
So this might be a really naive question.
Oh boy.
I don't know if I should.
I gotta stretch.
So if
Do I need to take
if someone was going to do that,
water
well, I don't want any. I'm
to
good
like-
with my kids. So the person would have got the egg white, taken the yolk out, and then what do you do with it?
That's up to them.
I'm not. Does it go like into the woman?
Oh yeah, and I mean you use it like regular lube.
One egg or two eggs.
I don't. So wait, you said you have chickens. He has chickens. He has extra egg white.
Even better because they're his chickens.
This never crossed my mind that this could be a thing. I've never looked at anything that came from my chickens. I thought like,
well, now you will never look at the egg white of your eggs from your chickens the same ever again.
Yeah, right. That's shocking.
Well, I got grossed out for a while with eggs just in general because somebody's like, "You're eating chicken, period," and I was like, "Oh God."
That's how someone described it to you.
Yes, and I was like,
bad.
"Oh my God!" I was scarred for a long time.
How old were you?
Like a year ago.
Oh Lord.
It was just like
kind of
gross. It was like
kind of true though, right?
Yes.
Because like sometimes someone will say it's like it's like the same place that chickens poop out of, and you're like, that doesn't really land.
No, yeah, I'm not eating
But
chicken
a chicken,
shit.
period.
I will let y'all sort that out.
Thing.
That
Yeah.
is true. Because only women can lay eggs, or hens can lay eggs.
It grossed me out for a long time. So those of you that haven't heard that,
But you're over it.
I'm over it
now.
Yeah, I got over it.
Yeah,
which is surprising.
All right,
Eggs are good for you.
I'll forget about it.
Other lube. So Randy has like a tub of Crisco next to his bed. Does that affect anything?
I don't even know what Crisco is.
It's
Is that like butter? Isn't that butter?
It's like a cooking
No.
type of thing.
It's kind of like
I would not recommend
like
that.
coconut oil. Well, yeah, because I guess I was wondering.
I mean, if you're just trying to have fun, go for it. But like if you're trying to make a baby, probably not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
there's no way
there's
Crisco
remedies.
is good for.
Well, that's what I was
like. Half of
coconut
this
oil.
stuff isn't good for a woman.
Coconut oil.
I probably
olive oil.
would not want that in my vagina.
My thought would be if you would eat it, it would be okay. Like the body could at least understand what it is.
Isn't it trans? What is Crisco?
Oh God, not Crisco. I wouldn't put anywhere near food.
But like
let
coconut,
alone-
people do use coconut oil.
That's what I was saying. Like if it's a,
but I don't know that I would use that. I think that may have been another thing that was in that study. I mean, go for it if you want to. I don't know that I would use it. I mean, I would probably work on trying to make sure that my own cervical mucus was up to par with conceiving instead of using
you shouldn't
alternatives.
You shouldn't. Ideally, you
really
wouldn't
shouldn't.
need lube,
yeah,
right?
you really shouldn't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So day
Does
one.
that answer all of your questions
No, I mean,
about
I have
cervical
a ton
mucus?
more, but
Well,
I'm gonna hold off on cervical mucus.
I want
for
to
a
just
minute.
give the anatomy sides in case people don't know this, because I find
Sure.
a lot of people don't know this. So day one of a woman's period is day one of her cycle.
Correct.
And then
And we track. Sorry, let me go back into that because I'll kind of help you in each phase here.
Okay.
So with tracking menstruation, menses, your period, we track the first day of legitimate bleeding. Any spotting that occurs goes on the previous cycle. So keep going.
Illegitimate bleeding.
Illegitimate.
I didn't know that. I thought spotting was the start.
Nope.
Doesn't count.
Does not count. Actually, we need to look at why you're spotting. That could be a cycle irregularity from the previous cycle.
Right.
And then on average, although nobody is quote unquote exactly the average, but on average, then day 14 is where you would ovulate. And then day 28 is where your cycle would restart again.
Correct.
In a textbook.
In a textbook, yes. So this is what this is like basic reproductive anatomy class. They would teach that a woman has a 28-day cycle.
Mm-hmm.
We know that that's not true. That's like a good average. Most women have between like a 27 to 29 day cycle. So yes, I would probably use that. But that's where the calendar method came from, where we said that a woman is ovulating in the very middle of her cycle on day 14.
Mm-hmm.
But because women can have hormonal imbalances, they can have things like PCOS, we know that might not be true, that they're ovulating in the middle of their cycle. And also as we age, ovulation looks a little bit different. Your body's trying to ovulate more because it knows that it might not have a chance to keep ovulating.
Really?
So sometimes, yes.
You might get a double ovulation?
No, you won't get a double ovulation. That's also a myth.
Oh, that would be...
So your body...
Surely someone's double ovulated.
So
at some
your
point.
body
By the
can
name of
try... So your body can try to ovulate multiple times, but it's only going to release an egg one time.
Wow. And is it true that eggs formed while you were still inside your grandmother?
Grandmother.
Hold on.
Oof.
Wait, let me
Mother
work this out in my head.
in the
so
womb?
it was when your mom was in the womb of her mom, the eggs were already forming for...
I don't know how that's possible.
All right. So maybe it's not that. Maybe it's
It's
maybe
in the womb.
Oh,
Yeah, you
maybe it was
couldn't
for
pass
the
down
mom. For the
eggs.
mom, not your grandma's. Your eggs, all of them are developed while you're still inside your mom.
Yes,
So
correct.
then the grandma
So
of
when
the
you're
baby,
born, you have a finite number of eggs.
that's
yes.
pretty wild.
Yeah.
When
Right.
you really think about
Yep.
that.
And just to kind of put it in perspective of like how ovulation works in general, when the follicle is being stimulated, usually multiple follicles are being stimulated all at the same time, and only one gets to be stimulated the most to release the egg.
Yeah.
So
So a woman would probably have 30 eggs when she's born in her.
way more than that.
So what happens to the extra ones?
they just die off.
Yeah.
I don't know where they go.
Yeah. Okay.
That's probably more of like a super in-depth. I mean, I don't know how many we're
many-
born with.
Yeah.
You know, every woman is different. But there eventually it just gets to the point where your ovaries just don't make, you know, we go into menopause.
Yeah.
So our ovaries are just not needing to ovulate anymore. So we don't really worry about the number of eggs that we have left. At that point, honestly, when we're entering into, like, let's just say a woman is trying to have a baby much later in her reproductive years. We
Which
look
would
at
be
more.
What's much later these days?
What's much later? I've seen so many different, I guess, opinions on what we think the late reproductive years look like.
Yeah.
So we always, so let me just back up. In the method that I teach, we look at peak reproductive years as being your cycles are regular and you're not moving toward perimenopause in like a very quick, fast way in terms of like you're not having anovulatory cycles, you're still ovulating. That would mean that we're still in our peak reproductive years. And that's different for every woman.
Right. Could be 40, could be 45 still for some
It could
women.
be. She could be cycling and having somewhat regular cycles still at 45. There is a potential for that. That is pretty late. Usually we start to see perimenopause much sooner than that. So I've seen, and I'll follow a few OBGYNs that are like really heavy into like the fertility awareness-based methods and that sort of thing. That really in your 20s is the peak of reproductive years that we start to see, you know, increases of miscarriages and just infertility in general increase as we age.
Yeah.
It just is what it is.
Well, that brings me to this, and it's going to sound really strange.
Oh, I was scared that you were going to say this.
What? So biologically, women get their menstrual cycle somewhere in the like 10 to 13, 14-year-old range.
That's
right?
about right.
So I'm a big believer in innate intelligence. So that intelligence, man didn't say like, oh, let's decide women are going to give or have their period at this age. So
Sure.
nature, God, whatever people believe in, it was predetermined. If that is the case, why wouldn't that be the most ideal time to impregnate a woman?
No.
And that's what kind of might. So tell us why.
So
the
your body,
earliness.
you have to keep developing, right? So if you've seen a 10 to 13-year-old girl, she's nowhere near developed, right? So that is the conception, if you will, of the onset of her fertility. That doesn't mean that she's necessarily having super fertile ovulatory cycles.
It like takes some time.
It takes time for their bodies to regulate. So that's honestly a really great time to learn a fertility awareness-based method.
Right.
Because
That's
a lot
what it
of
needs
adolescents get put on birth control when they're super young
Yes.
because their parents think that they're having irregular cycles.
Right.
So they're having heavy bleeding.
Yes.
They're maybe missing a period here and there, which means their body is not ovulating, or they're having weird spotting
like,
and stuff
and
within their
yes.
cycle. So that can be very normal for an adolescent all the way up until maybe 18 to 20 years of age.
And then that's the ideal, essentially, age range that nature has.
Yeah,
Sure.
25 seems older than I would have thought biologically.
To have children.
Yeah, like 20.
I think it just
21 maybe?
depends on when your cycles sort of regulate themselves. But I don't think
Yeah.
that that's necessarily confining a woman to saying that that's when she needs to conceive, you know, based on when she started her menstrual cycles.
Yeah.
So I think largely we just need to look at cycle health in general and what's going
Right.
on in each phase of the cycle. So I don't know if you want to get into more of like, you know, the
Well, yeah,
phase of the
let's
cycles, if
get
we want to
into the
keep
phase.
going
Oh,
and
yeah.
talk about.
Yeah, let's get
We've
into
talked
the
about-
phases. I
Baby.
love phases. Well, let
Because
me.
we've talked about the ovulatory phase and we were talking about, you know, menstrual or menses
Yes.
stage.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, pretty much a guy all he wants to know is just like, when are you going to get pregnant? Right?
Is that what they
Well, I
want to know?
think guys
Yeah.
are dumb though. A lot of guys don't even know that there's a window.
You're
to
right,
be honest.
That's-
correct.
But there would, so let's say, assuming 5 days, that would mean on average, day 9 to day 14 are the most likely to get pregnant.
They could be.
But then how do you know if it's day 17? How do you know if the ovulation's done? And then you'd pretty much be safe after that, right? If you could know for sure that it wasn't a fake ovulation, which is a whole nother issue that I didn't even know existed.
Sure. Yep. So that's why we really nail down the biomarkers like early on as when we're opening and closing the fertile window. So most women will be able to tell if they've had a failed ovulation because their cervical mucus is not going to be great when we start opening up the fertile window. So they might only have like a couple days of like, we categorize this in two different ways. And that's why I don't want to go like too much into it, but there's what we call a point of change, which is literally when the day that we kind of say that your fertile window is opening up, and it's like a more moist sensation of cervical mucus. You might notice that you are a little bit more like you're walking. We call it this walking sensation. Like walking around, you might notice that things are a little bit more moist in the area of your labium, vagina, and that, you know, I love these conversations. But so that's what we look at is like that point of change as opening up your fertile window.
So that would be a real, so the way that you differentiate between a real ovulation and a fake ovulation.
So that could be
the walking around
that
test.
could be a fake. You could, okay. Let me back it. Let me try to explain this a little bit better to men here. All right. So you've gone through menses, you've gone through your period.
Yep.
You
You're on
probably have a few days in between that we consider dry.
Which is risky.
What do you mean is risky?
Well, because you don't know if it's going to start.
Potentially.
Anything before is risky.
Day
1, 2, 3 would not be risky.
I would tend to agree with you that we potentially could have risky days in that, especially if the woman is not able to differentiate the end of her period with the beginning of her ovulatory window, which can happen. Like the follicle stimulating hormone launches much earlier than it should. And so we start producing estrogen much earlier in our cycle. And that's when our cervical mucus starts to increase. So that's what we look at as a marker of impending ovulation is opening up the fertile window with a point of change, meaning like we've gone from a more dry sensation to a more moist sensation. So that's that window right there.
But then you could go from dry to moist in one day.
You can, but that's why we teach women to do that.
But what if the sperm's already in there? And living for 4 more days.
That's a very good question. So there is a percentage chance on either end of your fertile window of what it would take for you to get pregnant on either end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why we look at the day of ovulation with the highest fertile mucus, and then we kind of like go down from there and try to make sense of what that would look like. So, but there's a way that we do this and the way that we teach this within the method that takes that confusion away. So if we were to have intercourse on a dry day or a dry night, then we're least likely to be in that fertile window, even if the next day you start noticing a point of change from dry to moist. Yep. So the likelihood of sperm surviving in that dry mucus is very, very low.
That's good.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's also when women are less likely to want to.
Correct.
Like you're fighting an uphill battle.
That's 1000% like, but then also you have to think of the alternative of being on birth control and also like not having a libido.
Right.
Yes. Terrible.
Let's go down that rabbit hole with birth control. So what?
Oh, this conversation's fun too.
Well, so what are your thoughts on birth control in general? Just give us the kind of big brushstroke.
I don't care what you do. Like I'm not pro birth control or pro fertility awareness methods. I don't lean on one end of the spectrum or the other. What I will say is that long-term birth control use does have its implications. Like you should look at being on it for a certain period of time.
Which is what? Because I thought it was like a short amount of, like when people say it was like a period of time, I thought it was like 2 to 3 years
of being on birth control.
Yeah.
I was on it for 12.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That is,
or 13.
Seems like 4 times the amount that it should
be. And it's not to say that women coming off of birth control are going to have problems conceiving, but certainly we don't have a lot of evidence to suggest otherwise.
Right.
So that's kind of what I have to educate people on, women on, like couples.
To set the right expectation.
It's just to say, hey, we don't really know what your fertility is doing, and you're getting up there in age.
Yeah.
And it's not to scare anybody. It's just that we just don't know what's going on. And that's kind of where I came from with it.
Right.
From my own perspective, is that we just don't know what's going on when you're on birth control. We have no idea what your fertility looks like. We have no idea if you're having cycle irregularities. In fact, the reason that you were probably put on birth control in the first place is because you were having cycle irregularities, and your provider just offered you this pill, and it shut your cycles down for X amount of years.
Well, and
which is sort of just like a Band-Aid rather than trying to figure out why. Now, if you're going to actually use it for, and which I feel if you're on birth control, like you're either using it for originally for cycle irregularities, but now you're probably using it to actually avoid pregnancy.
Yeah, they use it for acne. They use it for all kinds of stuff.
Acne. I was put on it for irregular cycles.
Yeah,
and at the time I was willing to take it, so there wasn't. Not that there wasn't like a lack of education surrounding it, but I felt like it was the best thing for me to be on at the time.
Yeah.
So that's what I will say, is that you have to make your own educated decisions whether you want to be on it or not, given kind of what we know about women being on or off of it.
So we mentioned this recently on a podcast, just about how if it's shutting down the cycle and nature, God has created it to empty, where is that going?
What the birth control?
Like, so so say
like
it
the
stops,
synthetic hormones.
it stops you cycling,
right,
and your body's supposed to bleed and
right,
rid itself. So if that's not happening for that long, that's a lot of keeping of stuff that the body would want out.
Sure, but we look at the synthetic use of the hormones above anything else, in addition to the fact that it shuts your cycles off. So yeah, I don't know so much that I would think of your body like holding on to stuff that it needs to get rid of necessarily. But I would think of it in terms of a cycling woman is a healthy woman, and we know that. So that's the advice that I would give to somebody if they're trying to, if they're either thinking about birth control or if they're contemplating going off of it. And like I said, I don't have any issues with either side of it. If you make the decision to be on birth control, that is your decision. I think that's a women's health right to have access to birth control in general.
Yeah.
So, but I just want women to be educated and understand, kind of what you're doing to your body when you're on it.
That's what's hard, is like, so essentially, and I'm summarizing, so I'm probably wrong. If somebody's educated and they hear what you're saying and we're agreeing with, is that if you're cycling, you're healthy. If you're holding it in, you're not. They're essentially choosing to be not healthy.
That's a tough one.
I know.
That's a really tough one.
That's where I struggle, because I get it and I want them to have a choice, but it's almost like saying, like, you can drink poison and be sick, or you cannot and be healthy, and you get to choose.
Right.
It's hard.
It's
same with food. Like I'm this way on anything that seems unnatural to the body. I just have to look at it from the glasses of like, I didn't design the body,
right,
but what it does, I'm very impressed with, and its intelligence. So if it's supposed to, and man's coming in to do some stuff that's against that, it's like, I don't know what other evidence I need if I'm a woman.
Right.
Which
to avoid it, to not want to put something like that in your body.
Right.
Well, I get that. I would argue that the pharmaceutical companies push so hard that the idea of somebody having informed consent about a drug just almost doesn't happen. Like you get bombarded with television ads, right? I mean, I do. I'm a guy and I get bombarded.
It is. Yeah. This is obviously, people are going to have their opinions about how birth control is being pushed.
Yep.
I could go into a whole spiel about why I don't think that birth control should be
unilateral. How about
anywhere? Yeah, because it also affects the man, whether they like it or not. It also affects the man.
Yeah.
It's the lack of libido.
Well, and I think
you know what I mean? Like that. I'm sorry, but that affects men. If a woman does not want to have sex, then that
what's
affects
Randy gonna do?
What's Randy gonna do?
So,
but seriously though, like you have to think of it from a biological standpoint too. Like if we're pumping every single woman with synthetic hormones and it's squashing her natural cycle, what does that do for the other sex?
Correct.
And starting them at 13 years old, and their
And
medical
starting
doctor
them
says, "Oh,
early.
just take this, no big
Yes.
deal. Oh, I know you're in pain, take this."
Right.
That doesn't really sound like informed
It's a
consent.
Band-Aid. It's not
Right.
no, it's not an informed consent.
Right. And how about this? Why, for women's rights side of this, why are we only focused on like the woman in the fertility category? Like, why aren't men taking a poison to shut down their sperm?
And
like,
there
why is
has
that not a
been.
design?
And guess what happened?
Men were like,
They got
"We're not
rid of
doing
it."
this."
Because
Why?
it caused too many symptoms.
Really? Guys are so soft.
God, they're
Guys
so-
could
and smart. I was going to say smart.
No.
We went
But
different
truly, though,
directions.
like
I couldn't
we're
handle.
we do
Not
want
what
this to
needed.
be.
Slightest
agree.
discomfort,
Yeah.
immediately done with
But
it.
seriously though, like we don't want this to be a one-sided thing anymore,
I
right?
know.
Like the women are
I-
saying, if I'm going to be on birth control, then like shouldn't you have to be on it too?
I tend to think
Sure, that's
that,
a
yeah.
great argument.
agree.
And I will let people argue with it all they want. Like,
The focus
Make
is
your own-
always on the woman to do something to,
sure.
and I get
To
it, but I
prevent.
also, it's just there. Why aren't we talking more about like men kind of get off easy on the whole thing?
Well, no, so the whole argument now that I've been hearing, and she said, I'm not gonna say who it was, but she was like, here's what we should do. She was like a women's rights kind of like argument. She was like, here's what we should do is at 10 years old, every boy should have a vasectomy. And then they
reverse
can
it
get it
when they wanna.
reversed when they decide that they want to have a kid.
Yikes.
And I was like,
Chaos.
that sounds insane to me. I can't believe you think that. She's like, why not? Of course. That should be the that
So
should
is
be
that
the
like
baseline.
is that like
I was
saying,
like,
okay,
a
well, if
10-year-old boy a vasectomy?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
well, they still have a lot of growing to do.
Yes,
So
their whole body and reversing, like they
Yeah.
haven't even hit puberty yet, and then
Right.
you're gonna reverse
well,
it when they're done with
so-
puberty.
But also think about that in terms of a woman.
100%.
That it stops the further reproductive
Yep.
health from developing potentially.
Right.
I don't know how much evidence there is about that, but there's definitely people that talk about them being on birth control before their body truly developed.
Well, that came up, and I remember you commented on it. We had somebody, or Randy brought up, wasn't there a study that women choose a mate differently on and off birth control?
Yes.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts on that?
I don't know, to be honest with you. What did I say?
I think
What
you
was
just
my
said. I think your
comment?
comment
I
was
have
just,
a lot
of thoughts
yes,
about
I think
this.
that's what it was. I have a
And
lot
he's
of
like,
thoughts
oh, we should ask her about
I
that.
would probably still say I have a lot of thoughts about that. The fact that if you meet your mate and don't have a libido when you're meeting them would be kind of weird, right?
Right.
So yeah, you could look at it that way. But that's not the only reason to, think about something like that. I mean, it could be true.
Yeah.
I
So-
mean, I think it's worth, exploring, but I don't know that I would put that notion into everyone's head that they're going to potentially choose another different person,
Yeah.
later down the road. I mean, this is the person that they, chose to marry. So we shouldn't look at birth control as a reason as why maybe they shouldn't have chosen.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it wasn't meant for people to be like, oh, this is why you
All
can't
right,
stand
this
this
is-
person.
Yikes. Maybe we just need to.
Well, I think that's what it was saying. We were saying
Exit-
like there's the
exit
7-year
this
itch,
conversation.
but then there's like even after like the first or second year of marriage, probably when people give up their birth control, start to normalize, and they're like, holy cow, who did I just marry?
But is that do we really know that that's a thing? See, I haven't looked into that, so I don't really.
Yeah.
I can't speak
I don't know either.
on
I just-
any.
I mean, if it's on
Platform.
Instagram, I believe it if I believe it. So, I'm not a big.
I just don't know. I mean,
I
if
know, I don't-
there
I don't
could be
know.
a group of women out there that feel that way, and maybe it is a research study that needs to be done, but I feel like that would be highly
Yeah.
one-sided.
And
So
it's
I-
an excuse to get out of marriage. Like you committed. It's,
Yeah.
Right,
People
exactly.
just
People
stick it
are
out.
It would be like an excuse to get out of marriage.
Yeah.
Like, hey, well, I
That's
was a
all it
different
is.
person before I went on birth control,
Right.
and now.
Well, it was a study, but it wasn't like just like quizzing people. It was a study saying they would show them different photos of men or different like zoomed in or zoomed out of their faces, and then they would have them over a period of time. They were either on birth control or off birth control, and they were finding the groups that were on birth control would choose a certain type of person, like the photo that it wasn't an actual person standing there, I don't think. And then when they were off of it, then they would choose
A different type of person?
different types of people. It wasn't the
Mm.
exact same photos; it
Interesting.
was just different types of people.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting
I don't know
concept,
either. I don't.
but
Right.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't run with it too much.
How much does diet play a role? Because I also read about there's certain foods and certain things and that would be more or less likely to get pregnant. Has there been anything that you found? Like one of them, it sounded weird, was like cereal. Like women that ate more cereal in the morning, which I was like, that's weird.
Call it more pregnant or less pregnant?
More. Or maybe that was for more
pregnant or less
male.
pregnant.
I think maybe that was for having a boy.
Oh,
They
Lord.
ate more bowls of cereal.
All
right, so then that brings you to like, what's the craziest thing you've heard to either get pregnant or like make a boy, make a girl? Is there anything that somebody's been like?
Just the concept of the
Positions
female
and-
versus the male sperm
Oh, yeah.
swimming faster. That's the only thing I know.
What
And
about
depth.
What about hot tubs? Do you think that those
So that's
is that a myth?
Reduce the sperm count?
it could.
Heat.
But
Heat.
like
Heat.
temporarily.
Yeah.
It's not gonna like
Saunas.
permanently make
Steam
you
saunas, though, not infrared.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
not gonna
infrared wouldn't work.
No.
it's not gonna
Infrared.
permanently, decrease your sperm count.
Right.
But-
It would be kind of like male birth control.
Well, and I heard whitey.
I don't know. I don't think that you could consider that.
What about
Would
whitey
be
male birth
tighties? So our friend wears whitey tighties. He doesn't wear boxer briefs yet, and he's an adult. He's our age. He knows who he is, and he listens to the
He
show.
knows who he
true.
is.
So does his wife,
Oh
Eh,
Lord.
and he wears whitey tighties. And I thought for sure that was a thing that at least when we were kids, I was like, that lowers your sperm count.
I think all these are
No?
myths. I mean, there
Yeah.
is something to the heat. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't take that and
Run with it?
run
Run
with
with
it. Do these people have children?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well then, I wouldn't.
But maybe less than they would have if he wore normal boxers.
There's a lot of that type of stuff out there, and I honestly just don't even listen to it because there's far greater issues out there in terms of
Right.
infertility that we need to address rather than hot tubs and whitey tighties.
That's why I think it's just belief.
So,
I
yeah.
like the idea of just if you believe it, your body's gonna just start either going one way or the other on it, which is good. All right, I want to hit on one last topic because
Okay.
so you're in the fitness space, and I think
Yes.
women who have their cycle, they don't realize are there certain times where they should work out or work out harder. There are certain times that they should. Is this true?
Is that true?
This is true, right?
Oh, this.
Oh, wait,
yeah.
hold on. she's like winding up.
I'm ready to hit
She's like,
the
oh
ball.
God, don't even say what I think you're gonna say. No, but I thought in fasting was my other thing. So working out and fasting.
Working out and fasting
Well,
together.
not even maybe together, but just separately as well.
Okay.
That women that are cycling need to consider more of their working out style and or their dietary needs during certain phases of their cycle, which
So-
makes sense to me, I think.
So there's some truth to that. But I always go back to what are your goals? What are we trying to accomplish?
Get pregnant. Let's say it's get pregnant.
Get pregnant. Okay, so when it comes to exercising and eating in general, for any cycling woman who's trying to get pregnant, we just need to make sure that we're eating enough and eating a well-rounded diet. There are foods that are better, that you could argue that are better for fertility. However, I think that just making sure that you're eating a very well-rounded diet is key, that there shouldn't be stress over what you're eating in
Right.
different phases of your cycle. I think women get caught up in that a lot. And the same thing with exercise, that they're just very, very rigid, saying, well, if I don't do this, I'm not going to get pregnant. Or if I don't do this, I'm not going to have regular cycles.
Right.
When really what we need to look at is foundational habits. Are we sleeping? Are we drinking enough water?
Right.
Are we over exercising? Are we under eating? What does that look like?
Yeah.
So that's where I see most of the problems coming from, is that we need to just have a better relationship with all of these foundational habits
Yeah.
and just let the pieces fall where they need to fall, right? Instead of stressing over, each phase of your cycle.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of women out there that do think that with cycle syncing their workouts in particular, that they have a better cycle. I would probably argue that they probably don't have a better cycle because they're cycle syncing, that we need to look at why they were having such a bad time with whatever they were doing beforehand.
Explain cycle syncing too. Like what are women doing to cycle sync a workout?
So there's like theories out there. None of this has been scientifically proven, by the way.
I've never heard of this before.
Yeah, so none of this is like backed by science at all. Not that I need science to back everything.
Yeah,
However,
not
there
in this
are
podcast
no
for sure.
there's not anything out there that tells us that we need to sync our workouts with different phases of our cycle or sync nutrition with different phases of our cycle. So, for example, during your period, hormones are low. You might not have a whole lot of energy to work out. So some people recommend that you do like lighter, mat work, Pilates, bar, stay away from the HIIT and like the really hard workouts.
That's what I heard.
Sort of thing.
Yes.
So there could be some truth to this. You could be burning the candle at both ends and you need to recover.
Yeah.
And so to that, I would say just be smarter through your whole cycle and try not to make too much of a big deal out of it. Because if you're having horrible, painful periods, we need to figure out why. We don't necessarily need to change what we're currently doing.
Right.
That's good.
Because when Randy's ovulating, like in the middle of his cycle, he does more cardio. and I didn't know if that was like
I don't know why this is his thing today. I don't know what's into you today.
When Randy's ovulating.
Yeah.
He just
I
likes
want to talk
cardio
about
during
cycle
that time.
syncing in a different direction.
Okay.
It's mind-blowing that women start their cycles at the same time
when they
hang out together.
And
I've got a wife and 2 daughters, 9 and 6, and I know that it's going to be three at the same time.
So does that truly happen in your household?
Not yet, because she's only 9 or 10.
Okay.
But yes, I see it all the time at work, and all of a sudden it'll be like she'll be right on. I didn't talk to her about talking about her cycle, but I'm going to do it anyway. Like she'll be right on perfectly for a while, and then something will happen where she'll have a different friend, or one of her friends will move away, or we'll move from where we used to live to somewhere else, or we'll go spend a whole bunch of time with her sister. And like you can see it go from 28 days, 28 days, 28 days, and then all of a sudden it's like 34 days, 34 days, 35 days, and then you find out like boom, she's synced up with whoever it is that she's with. It for sure happens.
Think it has to do with the moon and the earth?
I'm going to try to address this.
I think I got this right. That's what I've
noticed
it
as well.
Yeah.
There could be some truth to that. There's people that swear that their cycles sync up with the moon, like you were saying, like a gravitational pull and that sort of thing.
I've never heard the moon. I always hear it like best friends start cycling.
Sure, and I have heard of like daughters and their mothers being synced up and that sort of thing. I just don't know how much behind that. Like I don't know how well we can actually track that and say that that's actually a real thing. But cool. Like that's great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
crazy.
It makes sense biologically. Like you would want to raise kids at the same time, or like have babies at the same time and help each other and that kind of thing, I think.
Potentially.
Right?
Yeah. But
I don't know.
the thing
it
that
never made sense to me why
it would worry me though if I went from a 28-day cycle to a 34-day cycle, like out of the blue.
Nowhere. Right.
Because that's to me, there's something going on like stress or
that might be it too.
Delayed ovulation or something like that that's causing my cycle to be longer. I would be concerned. Just put it that way.
I've worked many years in like small office environments with women, and
there could be some truth to it.
It for sure happens.
There could be some truth to it.
And the only reason I know is because it's my
Sure.
it's my wife. So
and yours.
And what?
And yours.
It's
My
definitely
wife and my cycle. No.
It's definitely interesting. I mean, sure, why not?
I know. I need to find out if they're studying it. How do you study that though? Like that's the weird. Like you
I don't
gotta
know.
Survey.
make somebody.
We'll put one in the office.
Hey, become really close to this person.
We'll
and
put
then
put a
we'll
survey
measure it.
out and see. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't really pay too much attention to stuff like that because I feel like people try to take those concepts and like really run with them, like the same thing with the cycle syncing and that sort of thing. That they have this concept and they want to say, this is what I think you should be doing with it. And it's not really like totally backed up by science. Especially with like, if you want to get into the cycle syncing stuff, a little bit more, particularly those that are like trying to like compete or have like performance-based goals or something like that. That's like kind of what I go back to when I when someone asks me if they think that they need to be cycle syncing their workouts to their cycle, is I have to just take a step back and ask them what their goals are. Like, are you trying to feel better because you feel like crap throughout your whole cycle? Well, you need to figure out why.
Right.
Because it's not the workouts that are going to impact the cycle so much as it's, yes, it might be the cycle that's impacting the workout. Like, you could have lower hormone levels and might be a little bit more fatigued and so on and so forth. But honestly, it's the nutrition and the strength training appropriately and not burning the candle at both ends and recovering well that's going to get you through your entire month of your cycle, and not necessarily you compartmentalizing each phase and making sure that you're doing something specific during that time.
Gotcha. My last thing was like kind of in the same boat, lean body mass. I heard, so, and that messes with cycles, like women that lose so much body fat percentage.
Absolutely.
And working out too much and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. That is,
so that's a
1,000% a real thing. If you're under eating and over exercising and have a body, well, it's not so much body mass index, but it's like, you know, body fat percentage. Yes. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it's going to be different for everybody. You could have a woman that's, you know, below 20% body fat that's having very regular cycles. And you can also have someone that's in the 25% and greater, you know, that's also not having cycles, that's also having cycle irregularities. So you have to take that, you know, that each individual person, you have to look at their cycles individually and that sort of thing. But yes, that is 1,000% a real thing. If we start missing periods and we're having, it's like, you know, athletes that are having anovulatory cycles, amenorrhea.
Right.
And that is absolutely a real thing. Like the female athlete triad, is that what they call it? I can't even remember right now. But basically what happens is they're exercising to a level and they're probably under eating and under recovered. So their body is not understanding that they basically you're causing your body so much stress.
Deficiencies and
stress.
Stress.
That your brain is like, we don't need to ovulate.
No way we're having a kid right now.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
All right. My last thing is about testosterone.
Okay.
Because I just like talking about it in general. Do you think it's more... Well, and back to the birth control thing. So if you're taking synthetic hormones, then my general thing is that it's not great for you, especially to do it over long periods of time. And I still think that testosterone isn't great probably for people taking it synthetically. But are you seeing, is that happening much in the fertility world where men are low in testosterone and they're taking testosterone in order to get pregnant?
I do not know the answer to that.
No, or get their sperm. I don't know if it affects sperm count. I haven't really...
Do you coach men too? Like, do you coach men too?
I coach the couple together. on conception goals. Like, you know, basically what happens is when a woman comes to me wanting to learn the method that I teach, I always recommend that their partner sits in, or either they go back and tell their partner what they learned. So yes, in a way, I'm coaching the two of them together.
Guys, are the guys compliant or no?
Most of them don't.
Of the time?
Most of them don't want to sit in on it, and that's fine. But usually there's a level of understanding between the partner and who's actually learning the method there, and they can have those conversations, you know, all from our teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to throw it out there, Randy gets women pregnant all the time through chiropractic care. Have you seen any of that? Because
God, I hope not.
No joke.
Well, I had a chiropractor he used to tell people, he'd be like, if you get pregnant, you don't say my chiropractor got me pregnant. You say chiropractic got me pregnant.
Yes. Removing interference from the nerves that go to the.
Okay. Yes.
That way. Yeah.
That makes more sense.
He's not putting him in a private room.
I just recently, I don't. Oh, but I just recently had a woman.
But men and women, like, because that's where,
where it goes back to just being healthy. A healthy body is more likely to conceive.
And that is the bottom line of like all of this, is that we know that a healthy body is ready to conceive. Like a cycling woman is a healthy woman, you know, foundational habits, driving those home And certainly like there's other things that we want to look at too. Like if we're not conceiving, then we want to look at functional testing and lab work and that sort of thing. But I always tell women to get really good at the basics when they're trying to conceive, or even just want to, take a closer look at their cycles and just be healthier in general. Like just get really good at the basics and, hound on, drive home the foundational habits.
And did you do anything with saliva testing? Have you ever seen that in the world? Because I think that
Did you see my post about that?
No.
So you can actually,
but I love it.
So Ovuscope, which is like this new little cool product that they have, that they call it like an ovulation microscope.
Yeah.
So you can actually use your legitimate saliva from your mouth
throughout your cycle,
to correspond, to look to see because there's a certain pattern underneath the microscope. That's where the really nerdy stuff comes in.
Yeah.
So when your cervical mucus starts to fern out, it literally looks like a legitimate plant fern.
Really?
They call it a ferning pattern.
I love ferns.
Do you have photos of that?
I do. I have my own photos. You can go on my Heart of Health with Dori. Yes, I have an Ovuscope highlight on my feed. And you can see, so I did my saliva and my own cervical mucus, and I could see the ferning patterns in both of them. So they corresponded perfectly.
Don't you have to put it in the freezer, though? Or maybe the ones that I saw, you put it in the freezer for 28 days, and then you send it all out together?
Oh, you're talking about...
So... Yeah, the one I thought, or that I've seen, is you take multiple throughout the cycle. See, it made so much sense because the point of the test was like if you do blood or urine, it's a snapshot of that moment.
Correct.
In your cycle. For cycling women, they would do it like 11 times, like every other day almost.
That would make sense.
Spit into a vial.
To just try to figure out where her fertile window is.
Yes, and so then they charted it.
Right.
Cool.
So yes, so we can do that. Like if you can capture the ferning pattern underneath this little microscope, it's really cool. And that's the other reason of just like why we track. So that kind of goes back to my point. If you're having to send off your cervical mucus to a lab or saliva to a lab, then this is a great way to not have to do that.
Right.
To either buy the Ovuscope or just learn a fertility awareness method with me.
Boom.
There you go.
Yeah. How do people work with you? How do they find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
So you can DM me on my actual Heart of Health with Dori Instagram page. You can also email me through my website. I'm happy to do a free consultation if you're just wanting to explore fertility awareness methods in general. And I offer my services in more of like an integrative health-based type of way. So not only do we look at your cycle health, and I'll actually teach you the method, which takes about 3 different sessions. It's about 3 months based on how long your cycles are. So not only are you going to learn that actual fertility awareness method, so you'll be able to identify your fertile window, and also any cycle irregularities that you possibly have. And then I use integrative health practices to optimize your cycle. So if we need to look at labs or something like that, I can recommend functional lab testing, and we can look at those labs and figure out where we need to go from there.
Sweet. What was the website? So Heart of Health at Heart of Health.
Heartofhealthwithdori.com, www.heartofhealthwithdori.com.
DORI.
DORI.
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right. Awesome.
It's hard to say www.
I know.
I don't think you have to.
We get y'all frazzled
3 W's.
too. Yeah. We're at the end of the show where you're frazzled.
I know.
All right, thanks for
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Here
We're here for the health of it.
for the health of it.